Okay, happy 2020. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
How are you?
I'm well. It's a new decade.
I know. A new filling. What does your mom do? She makes you fill up all the space on the checks.
Right.
So now I have to do that thing with the 2020 there, because there was something posted on Facebook that you have to fill in all the numbers, or somebody will come in and write the last two digits incorrectly and
oh my God,
destroy your life.
So then it's really not the future.
It's not the future. Hey, you know what? This was the year that the Jetsons was 2020.
Really?
We were supposed to be flying around, have robot maids.
Right.
I need that freaking robot maid Rosie to come clean my shit up.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
What a letdown. Yeah. I'm, now that 2020's here, I'm looking forward to it. I feel like at the end of December, not the end of December, but December, we had so much going on that I was just like, oh my God, 2020 is going to be a nightmare.
It was a lot.
And now I'm like, all right, what do you tell your clients, Shiloh? Little chunks. What's next?
Right. It does feel. It still feels really weird right now, because this is the end of the first week, which is the 3rd is when we're recording, and I'm tired. It's like we had a lot during I traveled during the holidays. I visited family in the South, and you have all your family obligations. Like, I want all the sweets to go away, and I just want miso soup for like a week.
That sounds so good. I've been pescatarian for a full month now.
I couldn't do it.
I was at lunch today with a colleague, and the meat at the place we were at smelled so good.
Well, you also had to endure. You came over for New Year's Day, and Dan was making cassoulet with his duck, with the duck.
I know. I opened up your invitation, and I looked at my husband, and I'm like, I hate our diet. Like, how dare you make us do, not diet, but whatever, new lifestyle we're trying out.
What's really funny is he makes it like once every 3 years for New Year's Day, and then has to like make sure that if there's anybody new at the dinner, he has to announce like, be careful. A little goes
a long way.
A little. This is very rich. This is very, very rich.
I think he said it expands in your stomach.
Yeah, it does.
It was so good. So good. I'm so mad we didn't take a picture together at your party.
I know. I forgot. I just took a lot of Christmas pictures, which was great. I had remembered to do that. And the crazy thing that Apple does, if you have an iPhone and you're using iPhoto, especially on big holidays, you'll just get a little notification that pops up on your screen. It says, we've put together a movie of everything from the day. And then it goes out, and it looks, I think what it automatically does is it recognizes some faces and certain scenarios, and it takes out blurry, crappy pictures.
Right.
And you just have this beautiful memory set to music, and it's all edited and soft focus and kind of amazing.
It is fun.
Anyway.
It feels like forever since we recorded, though.
I know, so we're back.
This is LA Not So Confidential.
Oh, by the way, hi, folks.
If you're trying us out for the first time this year.
Just listening to us.
My daughter has dropped a podcast episode since we recorded last.
That's so cool. She had her trailer up, right?
She has her trailer up. She has her first episode up. She has 4 episodes in the queue. She's way more, with it than we are.
That's great. And you're doing it on Anchor? Do you just do it on the phone on Anchor?
Yeah, I've done everything on Anchor. No microphones or anything.
That is great. Super cool. That's kind of amazing how the technology is advancing.
It's kind of cool.
Okay, so we have a really cool episode today, or a cool phenomenon, and it's one that I have to say, like, I remember before I was I think when I was just working at the master's level, I wasn't aware of this particular mental health challenge, which is called Capgras Syndrome. And it's usually the result of some brain damage. And I remember it being used on a Law and Order episode, and wondering like, I wonder if that's based on something real. And then remembering it all these years later, going, I wonder if there actually are cases. And then you and I both did a deep dive and found some really significant cases.
A name. I mean, I'm not a Law and Order or Criminal Minds person, but
those are not the same, Shiloh.
I know. I have to keep them separate, and I did watch the clips, so I know there's different people. But yeah, I didn't know there was a name for it, but I've been aware of it. I'm surprised this wasn't an X-Files episode. You know how we did Folie à Deux and some other stuff that ends up in X-Files, and I tried searching, and it wasn't.
There's a couple of X-Files episodes about doubles, though.
Yeah, true.
So anyway, how do you want to do this? Because we both have a bunch of information. We should start off with the symptomology, or should we start off with an example?
Why don't we start off with the history?
Okay.
So just a basic definition. Capgras Syndrome, also known as Capgras delusion or imposter syndrome. So essentially the person believes that a loved one usually has been replaced by an imposter. It can also extend to more than one family member, pets, their home.
So objects and locations as well.
Right. So, the person can otherwise act and function normally, and there's this one very specific delusion going on. So that's what we're talking about today.
It's I would say very rare. I mean, we don't really hear about it a lot.
Right.
But it is so bizarre, and the people tend to be high functioning that have it, at least some of them, because there's different sequelae that can result in this, right?
Sure. Yeah, we'll talk about the different causes. But this condition was first described in 1923 by a French psychiatrist known as Joseph Capgras, and it's Capgras, not Catgrass, like you voice texted me, and I'm like, what the
hell is Capgras
syndrome? Capnip, what's going on? So he had a patient that was a woman who had basically complained that a doppelganger had taken over the bodies of her husband, her friends, and her kids. And she had several children. Actually, 4 of the 5 of them actually died. But she thought they were being abducted and then replaced by imposters. And so in French, they say the syndrome is called illusion de Soisy.
L'illusion de Soisy.
So the illusion of lookalikes. But she was 53 years old. She basically transformed everyone in her entourage into an imposter and said that they were all being replaced, and actually had numerous doubles that would stand in for her husband and her daughter. She also had a delusion that she was of royal lineage and very wealthy when she wasn't. But
which that sounds like what we would call a comorbid issue, because that's a particular delusion. Because Capgras is specifically about other people and objects and locations.
So
the other one is a grandiose delusion,
right, which is way more common. But it was interesting because there wasn't really much specifically on this until Capgras started writing about it with his intern and studied this patient who they call Madame M. But essentially, he was a little bit forward-thinking in that he hypothesized at one point that there was a biological brain disorder, but then kind of jumped on the bandwagon of the time of the psychodynamic explanation.
Which was the whole Freudian bullshit about this.
Yeah, that essentially, going back to sexual repression, that if let's say a son believes his mother has been replaced by an imposter, that it's because of the repressed sexual attraction that he feels to his mom. So
like a wildly displaced Oedipal projection.
Yes.
So the whole Oedipus complex that men are having a very deeply buried drive to have sex with their mothers.
Exactly. So that's there. It's suppressed, not repressed. And then maybe after some sort of trauma, head trauma, that rises to the surface. And in order to deal with this conflict of why am I attracted to my mother, your subconscious creates, it's an imposter.
It's an imposter, a double. That's why I'm attracted to her.
Right. So that pretty much reigned supreme throughout the 30s when people were seeing this. It really wasn't until like the 60s and 70s until we started seeing research being done and alternative explanations for it.
Well, I remember reading that part, and there was a psychiatrist on YouTube who will link to that particular documentary, which was really good. It's Dr. Ramachandran, an Indian psychiatrist who's very well spoken. talked about how the research in that area disproved it because they started realizing that it was not just mom.
Right.
It was siblings, and they could go, oh, well, maybe it's sex, and then it became animals, and they're like, oh, wait, not everybody can have these bestiality urges.
Explain it all away.
Yeah,
especially when it started into inanimate objects too. But yeah, he does such a great job at explaining it to the layperson of what's going on here. So the person with the syndrome acknowledges that the imposter looks exactly like the person, yet there's a disconnect there, and they feel that there's a disguise. They can see through the disguise, I guess, and we'll talk about why that is. But like we said, they can act pretty normally otherwise, but obviously it'd be very upsetting to all parties involved.
Very disturbing.
So you see things like anxiety and fear, sometimes violence. I have a couple notes about how this weaves into violence. Sometimes leads to obsessiveness about finding the real person. I mean, you can imagine just how crazy you would feel if you thought an imposter was living with you.
Think about it if you were a mom with this disorder and your child.
Oh my God!
You feel like your child is not your child, which is one of the sort of a version of one of the historical versions I'm going to give. The idea that someone has stolen your baby and replaced it with a fake, so you've got this sense of loss, and also, what am I going to do with this?
Sure.
This little fake person I'm supposed to take care of.
Fake person.
Fake person.
And it is more common in women.
Yes.
Than men. Do you want to talk about the historical case, or?
Yeah, I mean, so, once, just to circle back around to what you were saying, so when we talk about delusions, we're talking about fixed beliefs that are not true. That's the easiest way to define it. And we talk about Capgras being a delusion and that it is a syndrome. And the reason we say it's a syndrome is it's a condition that arises as a symptom out of another thing. So it could be a mini stroke, which damages a portion of the brain. It could be a traumatic brain injury. What were some of the other? Was it Alzheimer's? Like we can see it in Alzheimer's, dementia
patients, and then
brain. You said brain lesions, right? Mm-hmm. And also brain lesions. And then since it is can be common in schizophrenia too. Right. But I think the mechanics when it emerges in schizophrenia, it's a different mechanic.
Yes.
So
because it can be treated with antipsychotics.
Right. They can sometimes that delusion will kind of recede a little bit. So what we do know about it that we'll get into is that it is an issue regarding brain or neurological processing. So it can be about people, definitely. It primarily is about people. But it can also not just be one replacement. It can be an individual who believes that their loved one or family members are replaced with multiple copies or multiple imposters.
Right.
Like one of the examples you and I saw in a couple of the documentaries were, the woman who comes in pretending to be my wife on Tuesdays is a way better cook than the two others that come in on the other days.
Well,
so
she needs a break. So they send
It's like the Truman Show. Like they can't be on camera all the time.
Exactly.
They have to take a break. So, and then there was one case also, David, who is in one of the documentaries online. He even had sort of an episode of what we call depersonalization, where he questioned whether or not he was the real David.
Right.
So that's even takes it a step further than some of the cases we're going to talk about it. So
it really, it to me, felt like an offshoot, and this is going back to like grad school 101 of agnosia.
Yeah.
Like one of those first diagnoses you sort of learn about with in neuropsych, which is essentially an inability to interpret sensations, which leads to the inability to recognize things like visually. And I remember coming home and, having to memorize all these and talking to my husband about what agnosia is. And it's so funny because to this day, sometimes he'll be like, "You look different. I'm having agnosia." Like, he'll look at me kind of sideways.
And now I'm blanking on which one. So there's
aphasia.
There's aphasia, anosognosia, and there's propopsognosia, where the person is unable to recognize faces.
Correct.
Like they can recognize gait, dress style, vocal,
birthmarks,
but
like they'll say, "Oh, this person has this birthmark on their arm. It's my husband."
But they can't recognize the facial structure.
Even like celebrities or whomever.
We had a professor at Antioch that had that, which was fascinating. Yeah, he would lecture in the classes about, and one of our classmates is like, "So you can't see my face?" No, that's not what we're talking about.
I can see it.
We can see it. We just can't recognize it.
There's not a blur pixelation over your face right now.
Like you've been unfriended or something. But so there's an interesting story. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a historical story because I love all the weird shit, and then we're going to talk about the actual sort of mechanics of how this happens. But back in 1895, there was a young woman. Well, she was born Bridget Boland in Ireland in County Tipperary, and she lived about a quarter of a century, which was. I wouldn't say that was typical for that time. It's not in medieval times, but that she died very young. And the way she died, which was pretty brutal, is that her husband became convinced that she was a changeling. Now, in European folklore and myth, a changeling is a fairy that has taken your loved one and been replaced with another fairy that's being thrown out of the tribe or being substituted, with the idea that they can't really procreate, so they're always stealing human babies. So it's more often seen in children where the belief is that children can be stolen. So it was also used as a cautionary tale of don't go out at night because the fairies will get you. But this man, Mr. Cleary, became convinced after his wife's protracted illness that she was a changeling. He just came in one day and said, "This is not Bridget, this is a fairy." And now leading up to it, she was quite a successful businesswoman for the time. This was somebody who was like a very strong-willed woman, which we'll come back to. But this was this was also the age when Singer sewing machines had just come on the market. And women who were proficient with the Singer sewing machines could be very successful as seamstresses and dressmakers. So this young woman kind of makes a deal with her husband and her dad, who has like the version of government housing at the time. So they're living with him, not really paying a lot of money. A lot of money starts coming in, but she gets really sick after being out one night. And back then, no antibiotics, so a cold leads to an infection. She gets bronchitis. They had no idea of, needing fresh air or what was needed, so she was in a closed, overheated room for days, coughing and hacking. And apparently, one of the theories is that her husband suffered a psychotic break. And that break, we don't know if there was a head injury, but he became completely fixed in his belief, his delusion, that she was a changeling, to the point where they called the town priest in, and the doctor was called in, and the doctor was like, "Your wife is sick. Here's medicine. She needs to get well." His response was, "Well, we're using a different kind of medicine," and then proceeded to throw a jar of urine on his wife. And
Are fairies allergic to urine?
Exactly. Something. It was supposed to be some kind of allergic to human urine or something. And there was something in his belief system, which he may have heard from one of the priests, is that she had to admit that she was a changeling. And when she admitted that she was a changeling, then the changeling would have to leave the body, and his wife Bridget could come back. So it's almost like the old sort of the Salem witch trials is like, if we throw you in the water and you sink and drown, well, you're innocent. But if you float, the holy waters are rejecting you, and we're going to burn you at the stake.
Yeah.
So damned if you do, damned if you don't. One of the things that happens that is also interesting, is that he was not the only person that ended up threatening her and beating her and wounding her. He got the whole family, including her father and several other relatives, to the point where at one point, she was screaming and crying, "Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?" He pulls a firebrand, a flaming log out of the fireplace, and basically clubs her with it. So she doesn't get completely knocked out, but he sets her dress on fire. And then he becomes convinced, well, we'll just burn the fairy out of you. And he throws a jar of kerosene on her, sets her on fire. And nobody here, suddenly the house goes silent. They're not hearing anything. The doctor's like, I wonder how Bridget's doing. But he doesn't go to check on her. And when finally the neighbors go to the local, sheriff or whatever law enforcement there was, like, hey, something's going on at the Cleary house. They go up, and the husband's response is like, oh, she's just been away for a couple of days. She'll come back. And as they question, he goes, well, the reality is, like, she got stolen by a ferry, and we got a changeling body here. Here's what's going on. So they go in, and they identify the body, and she had not burned all the way through. It was easy to identify that was her. God. He was still in the belief that it was the process of, like, they just had to wait until the ferry escaped the body and she would come back. So they put him on trial. He was put on trial for manslaughter, which was a concept at the time as well, and did 14 years in prison and then shipped off to Montreal from Ireland. So he actually lived until about 1910 with no other supposed incidents. However, the other family members, and it kind of makes you wonder, was there folie à deux?
Right.
Had he strong-armed the other family members into hurting her, or did they start believing it because he had convinced them? I mean, when someone has a fervid delusion, it is possible to bring other people into the delusion.
It seemed very convincing.
Now, the other side of it is, this was a really odd time for a woman to be as successful as she was.
Yes.
So was there money motivation? Did he really have that delusional belief?
Or did he just not like the fact that his wife was making all that money?
Could be. I mean, that's unfortunately, as much as we love kind of exploring the forensic intersection in these kind of things, is that the real details are lost to history. Sure. And the wonderful podcast Lore, which does all sorts of spooky and weird things, they do a great episode of this. And it's been a stage play that's played around the world off Broadway and at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. So there's also a creepy children's nursery rhyme, which is, are you a witch, or are you a fairy, or are you the wife of Michael Clary?
Ew.
I want Sydney to learn
an
Irish accent and say it. Isn't that cool?
That is creepy.
So it does sound like, we don't have any evidence that he had experienced a brain damage or any kind of head injury prior to that, but it is possible that under the stress of, this is the breadwinner of the house, she's dying, she's got this horrific infection and we don't know how to take care of it. Brief psychotic episode is a completely a legitimate possibility.
It's just challenging his ego, and he's a intimate partner offender.
True, but if that was, if we kind of look at it from that standpoint, is that really going to help him along his goal, though? Like,
I don't know.
If he's challenged by her, what's the motivation? Is he going to inherit all that money and the house?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
So going back now to what the current theory of understanding about how the mechanics of this work is, that
this is purely looking at it as biological brain disorder. So we mentioned there's the Alzheimer's or dementia, that there's oftentimes psychosis that alters their reality when they're diagnosed with that, or it might be a hallmark delusion of schizophrenia, but we're sort of moving on to more brain disorder.
Right. We're talking more like a lesion, or like there's been an injury to the head. So, and the most of this information comes from people with Capgras that actually have been in accidents that have caused verifiable brain damage that can be seen on an MRI.
Right.
So that mechanical explanation comes from the idea that when we look at an object, the visual message of an object, whether that object is a place, a material object, or an individual, that visual image goes to the temporal lobes, the visual centers of the brain, but seeing is not just the singular process. It's part of a multiple level of process. So after you've recognized it, you have to respond to the object emotionally on some level. And you might have a very low emotional response to something. You might have a very high emotional response to something. But when it's obvious that when you look at something that you're passionate about, whether it's something that's related to a hobby or you hear a piece of music, in that instance, you're having an auditory synthesis of auditory information and how you're emotionally reacting to the music. Mm-hmm. Same thing could be for looking at a work of art, but in this case, we're talking about looking at loved ones. You're not just looking at your husband or your wife, you're looking at them and your entire body is reacting. It's kind of like they talk about, one of the things we know about cats and dogs is that when cats and dogs are sitting in the room with you and they're looking at you directly, they're actually hugging you. They're having an emotional, visual synthetic response of moving all those emotions together. They just don't express it the way humans do. They don't come. Sometimes they come up to you and give you affection. But what we're trying to illustrate is that the process involves not only the visual cortex, but also what we call the limbic system. There's a part of our brain called the hippocampus, which is this sort of, it's supposed to look like a seahorse, because I think, is it Greek? I think hippocampus is the Greek word for seahorse. Anyway, it's like a curved organ deep within our brain, and it wraps around another part of the another brain structure called the amygdala. And the amygdala is part of the limbic system. It's basically just sort of like literally the highway of processing emotional information. So it's taking our emotional response information and our visual response information, and it's creating a combination. It's creating an experience.
And the hippocampus is responsible for memory processing as well.
Right.
So, how do you look at a loved one and you know that you love them or you feel that? It's from your experience with them, your memories.
And it works. I think the time it goes into overdrive is when we sleep, because that's when it takes all the day's information of short-term memory, short-term information, and it processes it and figures out what's going to stay in the long-term memory versus what it's going to let go.
Right.
Kind of like Bebop. Remember, was it Bebop and Inside Out?
Yes.
It was Bebop,
yes,
right?
I think so.
That was the one that had been lurking around in her memory forever.
Yes.
So
it's a disconnect between the area that processes facial familiarity, the FFA, the fusiform face area, and the amygdala.
I forgot that word. Good for you.
FFA. So you can see them and say, this looks like my loved one, but I don't get the feeling that it's my loved one.
Exactly, which kind of goes back to another thing that we had talked about in the past, which is uncanny valley.
Right.
It's the same thing that happens when you look at a humanoid robot that is off. Mm-hmm. It's like and that's not even something you have an emotional reaction to. You just know, like, something's off here. So this is akin to that, and in a way, much more disturbing emotionally, because it's someone that you are supposed to have emotional connection with.
Right, and it's not a robot. I mean, this is a person, so it must be the imposter. I was able to wrap my head around this when I saw a statement that basically it's a delusion of emotion when most delusions are sensory. This is
I hadn't heard that. That's great.
I thought, yes, that's exactly what it is, which seems so odd, because we always think of delusions in terms of, things you see, or not things you see, but beliefs that are more messing with sensory issues.
Where'd you read that? Which research paper?
I think that was actually something that Capgras wrote in his original paper on Madame M.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
That just really, really, really grabs
home.
it. So, and it's also so the individual is also questioning themselves on a sort of a subconscious level, or maybe a meta level, is like, I know that I'm supposed to be having this emotional response. I'm supposed to be feeling this emotional warmth, this connection. I'm not feeling it. Therefore, it can't be real. This cannot be, can't be the person I care for.
Right. So I just want to mention one study that looked at Capgras patients, and a third of them had brain lesions. And I think you mentioned it, but it's important to talk about the MRIs and the brain mapping. And we didn't have this information until we were able to do all that. So technology had to also catch up with how we're diagnosing folks, like with lots of different things. This study also, when they were testing Capgras patients, what they'll do is almost like hooking them up like to lie detector instruments and show them photos of their loved ones.
What's it? The galvanic skin response. So a galvanic skin response can measure even the most infinitesimal levels of perspiration.
Right. So they'll show them photos of their loved ones as well as photos of strangers, and they basically have the same non-reaction.
Yeah.
So I think what we haven't mentioned that really hits this home is that for people with Capgras syndrome, it really is only that visual element, because they have been able to hear their loved ones' voices while not looking at them, talking to them on the phone, and say, yeah, this is my loved one, because that visual component is not there.
But the auditory component is still there.
It's still intact.
The auditory connection to the emotional center is still intact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it is very, very specific. Also in this study, they showed subjects with Capgras syndrome a series of photographs, basically of a model who was looking in different directions, someone they didn't know. And the people with Capgras syndrome would say that they were all different people. So what they were looking at is how they were essentially creating separate memory files for each of the pictures of the same model looking in different directions. There would be a different memory file for each one. Isn't that so interesting?
I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around that.
Okay. So,
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I'm trying to figure out why. Like, that seems like a completely different. It's another part of that brain damage.
Yeah, it was
right?
one of those pieces of saying this is connected to memory building. Definitely.
Okay, got it.
Memory building or memory loss, however you want to put it. And I don't think they quite knew what to do with it yet. It was just like, whoa, okay.
Well, because that almost sounds like that I can never pronounce it. Propophagia?
I have to look at the term.
Facial blindness.
Yeah.
But that's...
I don't know. It was super interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to have to read more about that. I had not read that in the research at all.
I'll link that study too.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
I love all this stuff. It takes me right back to neuropsych class and my internship that I did in neuropsych. It's so interesting. Anyway, I'll find it. Anything else that you want to add?
Well, there was one thing that was really like... just knowing, because we have friends that are Aussie as well, is there's a British and an Aussie saying of when somebody's gone crazy,
okay.
They say they've gone off with the fairies. And apparently, in the Cleary story, Michael's mom had disappeared for a while, and he kept hounding Bridget, where's mom, where's mom, where's mom? And she said, I don't know, your mom's off with the fairies. And that supposedly was one of the things that kind of pushed him over the edge. So it sounds like there was a little bit of DV going on, and maybe they had been arguing or something. But I mean, maybe I'm reading into how she said it, but I think
snarky, of
course.
Like
kind of snarky. And,
well, your mom's gone off with the fairies.
I'll show you the fairies.
Yeah, exactly. Should we talk about the TV shows that it's been? Yeah,
the first one I saw was a Law and Order episode.
SVU, right?
SVU, which was really heartbreaking because, of course they start off like the pre-story is this just, filthy, neglected looking little orphan, orphan, what's the word I'm looking for? Ragamuffin wandering the streets of New York that gets found, mm-hmm. and she's hasn't eaten and she's malnourished and basically just been left in the street. And they get the story of where she's from and what her name is, and they go and they kind of tear the house up, and it turns out it's a really disgusting couple that's sitting, playing video games all day. Right. And clearly there's drug use and the place is filthy. And you find out that the dad is a drug addict and, just a all-around dick and doesn't really care about the kid. And the mom is actually, that's a boyfriend, and mm-hmm. the mom is the biological mother of the daughter, uh-huh. who had been in a bus accident and gotten a traumatic brain injury. And she actually no longer recognized this little girl as her daughter.
Oh,
so she started.
The mom was in the bus accident.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so she no longer recognized her daughter as her own and was being really mean to her, and they weren't feeding her, and they were like, just get lost,
Right. And wasn't he abusing her or something?
I think he was abusing her too. He had been beating her, but I don't know if there was sexual abuse.
It's not my daughter, so
why do I care, right?
I'm going to play my video games.
So one of the things that we talked about is that we know about the research that they integrate into this storyline is the idea that the auditory and emotional processing is still there. So they talked to B.D. Wong's character, I think, and he said, well, maybe we can reintroduce them we can try and kind of help support those pathways by letting her connect to the voice. Mm-hmm. So they separate them in two different rooms, and the little girl is calling out to her mom. The mom's face lights up. She immediately recognizes the
like
voice.
An intercom or something.
It's an intercom, and her mom's sobbing. And the direction was for the little girl, she was supposed to stay in the room and not go through the door. And of course, the mom is like, baby, come to me, please, please, please come to me. And the little girl, thinks she's got her mom back. She runs through the door, and the mom immediately just starts screaming at you, you're not my daughter, you're not my daughter. And so I think they end up DCFS or Child Protective Services comes in. But that was the first time I'd ever heard of it. I think that's probably like a 14 or 15-year-old episode.
I have season 12. It's called Bullseye. I don't know how many seasons there are into now.
I think they're over 20.
Oh, my God. Criminal Minds had one, too. So season 7, episode 3, it was a cop that gets into a traffic accident, and then he develops Capgras Syndrome and doesn't recognize his family, his wife, and his daughters. And I just know there's like a really tense scene where there's like a standoff with him and whoever the investigators are in Criminal Minds, and they blindfold him. They explain it to him, and then they blindfold him, get him to put the gun down, and then the wife comes in and hugs him. So same thing, like he can hear her, but not see her. He can hear her,
and he'll have the sensate, because there's also a physical sensory process as well, tactile, what we call it.
So she's hugging him and saying, you just can't look at me, we're going to go to the hospital together. And then it sort of sounds like same thing, like the blindfold drops and he loses his shit again and doesn't recognize her and says that they've been taken over. And then did you know there's a Scrubs episode?
No, and I thought I knew all the Scrubs episodes. What does Scrubs do with it? There's a
Scrubs episode where a patient has Capgras syndrome, and they're talking about it. And so he doesn't recognize the treating physician as the same guy that was there in the morning. So they just start fucking with the patient. Like, yeah, that guy sucks. But, and they're just messing with him. It's hilarious. And the guy's like, yeah, that guy is really weird. Talking about them as if they're two different people. So it's definitely a Scrubs take on it. Yeah. Where they're like, let's just screw with this guy.
Yeah, some things don't age too well. Really, as we get more sensitive to mental illness issues.
Yeah, true.
Because it sounds like really these examples are quite heartbreaking.
Oh, yeah. To say it would be distressing is, putting it mildly, I think. Yeah. And especially with going back to this documentary that you can find on YouTube with David. Yeah. That the adult male that was involved in a car accident, I don't know if he lived with his parents before or afterwards, but clearly they have this huge home and he's staying with them.
Yeah. And they're
he has a back apartment. He
has like a guest house or something like that.
But he believes that both of them have been replaced, and will say things to his dad, the other guy is a really much better driver than you are, and talks to the mom about her cooking, and the other lady's much better at the cooking than you are, and he's one of the ones that has the location place too, where every once in a while he'll get agitated and say, I just want to go to my apartment.
I need to go to my apartment. This is not my apartment. And the mom would say, this is your apartment. This is where you live. No, this is not my apartment. So she found that a workaround was for her to walk him out the front door, go down the steps, around. It looked like it's kind of an estate almost, around to the backyard and walk him through the yard into the other entrance of his apartment. And he would go, yes, this is my place. This is the place I'm supposed to be.
So, they seemed like they were handling it so well, but it must be just so incredibly heartbreaking.
Yeah, I mean,
They had found their ways, but
yeah, I mean, I think it had been years by the time this is done. So I mean, sometimes when you have the means, I mean, I can't imagine a family of lower income having to deal with that without resources. That'd be brutal, just brutal.
Sure. Yeah.
So one of the places that we got some more of the information of how I shared the mechanical issue was a website. There's a psychologist named Dr. Duffy who has a great podcast. I listened to a couple of episodes, and he's got a blog and a vlog, and he does some informational videos on YouTube. And he actually has a client that has Capgras, a male client, and he gives an example which was very interesting. And he's also very upfront about there isn't really a successful treatment for this right now. It can't be fixed. Who knows, maybe in the future if there was some kind of miraculous stem cell, where you could just inject it right into that area that would reconnect those fibers or help that repair. But
unless it's like a lesion that you can go in and remove. Right,
and then the brain tissue can kind of regenerate around it. But right now, there's very little to do. So what he does is he talks about, which is a really important to remember whenever you're working with someone delusional, which is something in working with law enforcement and in crisis care. When I do encounter, and I haven't encountered a number of delusional people either organically or under the influence of substances, you don't enter into their delusion and you don't deny their delusion. You focus on, well, this sounds like it's really distressing to you. So how can I help you with the distress? Like maybe we can talk about how to deal with the depression or the anxiety that comes from this. So Dr. Duffy speaks, very cogently on working on the emotional aspect of how to deal with, this must be very difficult for you, and like how can we get around this? What do you think would help? So that he's also creating a therapeutic alliance. So he's not really, with this male client, able to get to the point where he develops true insight into the individual so that the guy can even admit there's something wrong with me. But I still believe this, which is very difficult and delusional. But his most successful intervention was because the guy was convinced that, he felt guilty because he was sleeping with a woman that's not his wife. It's like, there's this woman, she looks like my wife, and she's really nice. I like her a lot.
But she's not like, sleeping with her.
Yeah, I don't want to get in trouble, and, I feel really bad. So one of the interventions that was successful is that his wife, when they were in the home together, if she was in the kitchen or in another room talking, he would know that it was her. So what she would do would be to keep up a dialogue nonstop, not asking him questions, but describing, hey, I think what we're going to do for dinner tonight is blah, 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 and slowly move into his visual range as she's talking.
Wow.
And he is kind of indicating that was the one thing that seemed to have a little bit of impact where at least his client could question.
Those two things couldn't cancel each other out.
In that moment.
In the moment. Oh,
I don't think that it stuck. I don't think that it stuck because it goes back to what you're talking about with that sort of fragmented memory implantation or integration. So it doesn't really seem like it would have a long-lasting effect, but at least it could.
Or he doesn't have enough time to think about it in the moment because he's interacting with her.
Right.
So that's
so that might sustain for a few minutes or a few hours or maybe the night.
Difficult.
But I thought that was pretty creative. So we'll put a link up to his site too so you can hear him.
See anything, because I didn't, about forming new relationships with people? It probably wouldn't have the same effect, right?
No, I didn't. And that was the question in all the research that I was going to ask you if you had gotten to, is that
maybe we should have asked each other before we recorded.
Or no, this is how we do it. This is kind of people are sitting here listening to us as we try and figure this out. What I find interesting is if there's damage to that area and you're talking about it is now affecting the person's ability to integrate even profiles and face frontal shots, not understand that they're different people. Can they actually form new relationships even with other people?
Right.
Besides just the loved ones?
Yeah.
Or are they going to have this sort of truncated, limited emotional life? And I think I've shared in here at one point, I'm not sure which episode it was on, but we had a lecture in my doctoral program. One of my professors brought in a client of hers and I'm not broaching any confidentiality at all. This woman lectures and speaks publicly about having a traumatic brain injury that occurred about 28 years ago. And her injury basically is the result that we have a lot of safety mechanisms on recreational vehicles.
Right.
Before this accident, a lot of recreational vehicles did not have seat belts and could flip over very easily. And she had what was called a brain bleed at her brainstem on just fell off like a little cart. It was not a big deal, except that she was dizzy and had some problems. And they called a friend of theirs that was on the mainland. They were on an island. The guy was like, no, you got to air vac her back. This is a brain bleed. We're really worried. So she was living with her husband for 15 years. I remember her giving the lecture and talking about she remembers loving her husband, but she doesn't love him anymore. And I remember it kicking me in the chest. I had such a reaction to that, and the idea that could be taken away from her. And she goes, I really like him. He's a nice guy. He treats me very well. I remember the way I used to feel, but it's like I hit this wall, this emotional wall, and it's she didn't have full vocabulary as well, so it was a little bit hard for her to develop. Now the good thing is that I heard many years later, 11 or 12 years later, she was lecturing to another class, and she had some improvement. She was like, I'm having more feelings for him, but like you were saying, I don't know if it's that the old feelings were coming back, or she was finally able to develop new feelings for him.
Sure. Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. That's fantastic. Just crazy stuff.
Okay, so there's a couple of other things that are really interesting in the psychiatric journals about Capgras is that they even differentiate it further from other conditions that are similar and just as rare.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Did you read about that, the Fragoli and the intermetamorphosis? I think that was fascinating. So Fragoli syndrome is based on Leopoldo Fragoli, who was an entertainer in the 19th century, and he was basically what we would call today as a quick change artist. And they're actually kind of interesting. You've seen them sometimes on America's Got Talent or talent shows like that. A great example of it, if anybody watches the stage show of Frozen, there's an amazing, amazing costume change that happens when Elsa, kind of steps into her power. And you can watch it on YouTube, and you can play it on really slow, and even on really slow, it's mind-blowing how fast the costume changes. But
she takes her braid out of her hair.
Well, then she does, she does it just like in the cartoon. But the dress disappearing is really kind of amazing. And it's they
do it in Aladdin too with Jafar, the stage production.
Oh, really?
Changes costume.
Oh, when he becomes the really bad genie. Yeah.
That's your Broadway talk for this episode.
There's your Broadway. You have to have that with us. So Fragoli syndrome is this delusional belief that one or more familiar people that are known to the patient are seen as persecutors, and what they are is they're the same people, one or two or three people, but they're repeatedly changing their appearance.
Right.
And now how that is actually becoming, we can bring that forward into the year 2020, is a phenomenon called gang stalking. And if you're working with someone who feels that they're being gang stalked, if they have that delusional belief, which is really tough to work with because there's no way you can deny any of it. There's no way to sort of even generally reason with the idea that the person believes that everyone is following them, and they can look at just a person across the street going, no, that's her. She was down the street before, she put on a wig, and that's a different dress, but I know it's the same person. How do you know it's the same person? I just know. I can tell. So we call that Fragoli. Also, there's another one called intermetamorphosis, and it's another sort of misidentification syndrome that we talk about when the person believes that familiar people familiar to them, have exchanged identities. So for those of you that are old enough, the episode of Gilligan's Island where Ginger and Marianne switch identities.
Oh, all right.
It's very funny. So it's been talked about, they've done it in sort of in science fiction and horror movies, like in The Sixth Day, where Arnold Schwarzenegger has a character he's been cloned that he didn't know about. Battlestar Galactica with their whole okay, spoiler alert for a show that's been on, it's been in reruns for like 15 years, has a whole clone, like half of the population is clones and they're actually Cylons and they don't realize they're Cylons. And Star Trek has used it several times as well.
And
so
then there's another one, I forget. I kept
is
reading
it the mirrored misidentification?
No, but it was talking about like people's organs have been replaced or are missing, like they don't have organs.
Well, that's really close to the Capgras Syndrome, where the person believes they're dead.
Yes, there's that one.
Yeah, they believe that they're dead, or putrefaction syndrome, where an individual believes that not only are they dead, but they're rotting.
Yes.
And but what's interesting about all these are like they're either, once again, like Capgras, they're either related to an already existing form of psychosis or brain lesions.
Yeah. Crazy.
So, so the mirrored misidentification means that a person looks at their reflection in a mirror and they believe that that's a stranger. They can't recognize themselves in that. There's all different versions of this. And what's very, very interesting is that, at least in one case that we're going to talk about today, it's gotten somebody off a murder charge.
Right.
Do you want to talk about that?
Why don't I start with that one? So Niall Stapleton, this is just in 2013 in Ireland. And he was at the time, a 32-year-old college student. And in 2006, as a teenager, he had been involved in drug use and was essentially, what we know now, misdiagnosed with drug-induced psychosis, but eventually in 2008 properly diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, but was not medication compliant, and it even had delusions about governmental conspiracies to get people on medication. And so his delusion revolved around medication, which kept him from being medication compliant to treat his psychosis. But he lived, because of all these troubles, he did live with his family in Ireland. A lot of just bizarre behavior. His mom had to fly to Australia once to go get him. He just turned up in a psychiatric hospital there. He had tried to rob a bank once just by basically passing a note saying, "Give me all your money." No violence, nothing like that. But
I just want the money.
Got arrested for attempting to rob a bank. So a long history of bizarre behavior. And the day before his crime occurred, he was at a family barbecue, and everyone said he was acting very erratically and paranoid. He accused his brother-in-law of putting LSD in his beer. He was talking about not wanting to go to the barber shop because he was afraid he was going to get abducted or taken hostage there. And the next day, he was in the backyard at the family home and saw his mother in like the garage or a structure out in the garden area, and thought for sure that she had been replaced by someone else posing as his mother, and also mentioned that he thought he saw like a dark figure sort of sneak away through the hedges. So he saw his mom and said, "That's an imposter. I need to kill the imposter," and it would disintegrate from the body. So as soon as
she came out, which is kind of like what we're talking about with the fairies, right? If you kill the body, you're not killing the body.
Ireland also?
Yeah, it was Irish.
Okay, well,
it may be that there's the lore, the myth of that, but the idea that you're not really killing the person, you're killing the entity or the imposter.
Yeah. So that lore may still have fueled his delusion just in that part of the world. But as soon as she came out of the shed, he took the handle of a shovel and beat her in the head. She ended up surviving a little bit, but I think on the way to the hospital, she ended up dying. And he was, I couldn't, through various articles, couldn't figure out why, but he was arrested after the funeral. He had a 4-day trial, and forensic psychiatrists testified on both sides, essentially agreeing that he met the criteria for a special verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity, meaning that he, at the time of his crime, was insane or believed that he was killing this doppelganger and not his mother.
Which we've talked about before. The NGI defense is so rare.
Yeah.
I mean, we never hear of it today
No.
being successfully used.
No. I mean,
So-
people try saying that they're incompetent to stand trial way more than
Right.
I was insane at the time that I committed the crime. And it took a jury, less than a day, several hours, but to come back and say that that was appropriate and that he was found not guilty by reason of insanity. So.
And what were the substances again? Did they do a tox screen, or is that information available of what his drug of choice was?
No, all I saw was that he had dabbled in drugs a lot when he was younger, like a teenager, and that's
Okay.
when he was misdiagnosed. At the time of this, I don't know if he was self-medicating with illicit substances or not. I didn't see anything.
So an underlying mental illness,
Yeah.
self-medicating with
Probably.
most likely a combination. I mean,
At least alcohol. He was drinking alcohol at
Yeah.
the barbecue and thought there was LSD in it. So, yeah.
which is also another interesting thing that happens, and we're going to link, as we do for our shows, our research materials, which are so good. One of the ones that is the best, and I only am skimming the surface of it because we could spend a whole episode just on this. It's from the Journal of American Academy of Psychiatry, The Masks of Identities, Who's Who. It's delusional misidentification syndrome. So, the Fragoli, metamorphism, and Capgras are all talked about. It's a really interesting article. It's free to download, so we can link to it. I think that's really interesting because they talk about when we try and look at the actual violence that's connected to these syndromes. It's rare.
Right.
However, when it does happen, it's intimate partners.
Yes.
So, and one of the ones that, like you were saying, it actually, even though we're not giving examples today of women being perpetrators or victims who are diagnosed with this syndrome, they are the most common perpetrators, especially when they're mothers. There's a special amount of violence that gets, and this is where it does actually, you circle back around to Freudian and primal drives of, there is nothing more terrifying than mama bear. So the belief, even in this psychotic delusion, that this thing in my crib, my baby's crib, has taken my baby.
Yeah.
There's a potential there for a lot of violence.
Well, and then I found I wasn't able to access the entire article, which is so frustrating. I guess I could have paid $40 for it, but in the Journal of Forensic and Legal Medicine, there was a case review, and it's called Mental Illness, Violence, and Delusional Misidentifications, the Role of Capgras Syndrome in Matricide, so sons killing their moms.
Which is an issue in working in community mental health.
Yes.
It's a huge issue because, and that really does have to go back to basic object relations, good breast, bad breast. I mean, that there's a whole developmental period of the child not knowing the difference between itself and the mother. I mean, it's, and especially male children towards their moms. There's just this unbridled rage that is really frightening at times.
Yeah. I'm going to still see if I can access this, but essentially they did 2 case presentations of psychotic sons suffering from Capgras syndrome. It just said that it may be a specific risk factor to violence towards others, particularly mothers. Kind of interesting, especially when we're looking at threat assessment, violence risk assessment.
You know what I got? It's funny because I follow somebody like one of the Facebook groups that's about science academics, and it's all different versions of science. And somebody put out, I had never even thought about this because I've contacted researchers and said, hey, I read your research. Can I interview you? Those kind of things have always worked out really well. But this female researcher posted, hey, by the way, we don't get paid for any of those article journals. We get paid nothing. I know you guys are getting paid a lot. If you send us an email, we'll send you a copy of it. And I got a copy of 2 research articles because they've got it in PDF. All you got to do is send them an email. Most of the stuff is available. So
that's true.
For anybody out there that's interested in that, I mean, I have access. You can always. I still have access to some of the journals. So
yeah. Okay, so there was also a case from 2008, 2009-ish. And this was in New York, and the gentleman's name is Blaise Cotte, Blazej, and then his last name is Kot. So he was a 25-year-old from New Zealand, and he was a postdoc student at Cornell.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
And his wife, Caroline Coffey, was a postdoc researcher at the university. So he was a guy that people described as typically pretty aloof and shy with strangers, but at Cornell, he kind of blossomed, ended up forming this relationship with this woman, and they married in 2008. But they had a lot of stressors going on. He ended up taking a leave of absence from his doctoral program to work for a business startup, and he was working like 60 to 80-hour work weeks. Supposedly there was mounting financial hardships with the two of them, and there was this onset of depression, some paranoia, and eventually what we're going to see is these acute symptoms associated with Capgras delusion. He was, he was working on his PhD in information science. So he was, like I said, he was originally from New Zealand. But according to his attorney, he had exhibited schizophrenia-type traits as a teenager, kind of like saying he felt like people were always watching him.
So having some paranoia, some negative symptoms, like, because you were mentioning earlier, sort of interpersonal challenges, that might have come across as being a loner or something.
Yeah, but then very much like people are watching me through the electrical outlets type psychosis. So he came to believe that his wife was an imposter, and they went on a hike in a hiking trail in New York near their apartment, and he slashed her throat on the hike. And then came back to the apartment and tried to destroy evidence, bloody clothing, computer records by setting fire to their apartment. So the cops get called, and he leads them on a 5-mile high-speed chase. So this isn't like our, McCleary person that's like, oh, no, cops, we're just, waiting for the ferry to float out of her. This guy is like, obviously knows he did something wrong.
Right, which is different from the kid from Niall, the previous Singleton, because that delusional belief system was so strong. He there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing. This person may be delusional, but that probably would not stand up in court as an NGI, right?
Correct.
Because they had awareness, because they were trying to cover it up.
Yes,
okay.
And I think that was pretty much the difference. I mean, also this happened in the United States, but so during the police chase, he tried to cut his own throat with a knife, and the cops found him in his parked car with blood all over him and were able to airlift him and save him and take him to a hospital. But he was found guilty of murder and got 25 years to life, second-degree murder, as well as like third-degree arson and tampering with evidence. But Dr. Coffey's father, the wife's father, at the trial placed her urn with ashes up on the prosecution table during the trial and during the deliberation of the jury phase, and basically told the court that her family thought it would be appropriate for this convicted murderer to see what's left of his wife.
Wow.
So it was really powerful, and basically said this is all there is left of her. So yeah, he had quite a different outcome than Niall Stapleton, who actually at some point did come around and say, oh my gosh, I did kill my mom. It wasn't an imposter. But that was after. I mean, it doesn't matter if at the time you believe you're insane.
No. Oh, yeah, I wasn't going there. I mean, the look on my face was, immediately I'm trying to think in both of those cases then.
There might be this point of realization at some,
So if there is the chance for a point of realization, was it that their Capgras emergence or presence was organic, related to underlying schizophrenia, and then aggravated by environmental factors such as drug use? Because there's drug use in both of these, right? Was there drug use in the second one?
Mm-mm.
Oh, there isn't.
No.
Interesting.
Just a lot of stressors.
Okay.
I mean, being a PhD student, working 60 hours a week.
Oh, well, that's insane.
Financial issues.
You can't do that.
No, I know.
You can't do that. I mean,
something's got to give.
Well, this is that's awful that I jumped to that place, but both of us having been doctoral students, and I worked. There was a point at which in my last couple of years I worked half-time, and it nearly killed me trying to do everything that's required. It's just impossible.
Yeah. No,
the stress level.
He ended up taking a leave from his studies to do that job with that startup, but still, I mean, that's intensely stressful.
Well, that's really interesting because in going back to the paper that I was referring to, they looked at what data they had, because this is so rare. It's not like you have a totally existing pool to do double-blind studies or anything on, but they looked at the 104 cases of these various types of misidentification syndrome between 1957 and 1994. So there you go right there. Look at that span of decades, and you've only got 104 cases that you can look at where they had enough information on treatment and what was done. And then so they're kind of going backwards. They're looking at it forensically, trying to figure out okay, in this case,
what have people tried,
and these aren't even exactly the same exhibition of these symptoms, but let's see what's going on. So 70 patients showed improvement when given antipsychotic medication. And even then, well, what kind of antipsychotics were available in 1960? Thorazine and Haldol, I think, were the only ones. But 34... They
can't feed themselves, so they're also not...
Exactly, they're not delusional, right? So 70 patients showed improvement, but 34 didn't. And then in 20 patients... and another researcher's examination of 20 patients with these syndromes, that only 7 of them had any improvement at all. And that in those cases, the remission of the symptoms either happened just at the same time as the remission of the underlying psychosis. So it's like as the psychosis or the schizophrenia or the acute short-term psychotic disorder kind of resolved itself, then it went away. So it kind of came mysteriously and went mysteriously. So
well, and with antipsychotics, aren't they better at treating the hallucinations rather than the delusions?
Oh, yeah,
so
absolutely. It's like turning down the volume is the way a lot of clients will say.
Yeah, I've heard it.
Yeah, it's like, okay, at least now the voices are so low that I can ignore them. And I wouldn't say that. I would never say that visual hallucinations are atypical. I know that some psychologists will disagree with me and say they're atypical. I don't believe that they are. I think because we don't look for visual hallucinations in schizophrenia as much as we should, because because generally the way you're asking it is, are you seeing anything that anybody else is not seeing? Well, how the hell am I going to know?
Right.
Like I could be surrounded by people and think everybody sees them.
That's a really good point.
That's a very different experience than auditory hallucinations.
Sure.
So I think the medication will help. In response to what you're saying is that if there's a comorbid existence or presence of anxiety, and the anxiety is fueling paranoia, and the paranoia then continues to fuel the delusion, then maybe some medication that addresses those issues could release it to where, it may not be my wife, but I'm not so worried about it. I guess I'll just have to deal with it.
Right.
Because that's one of the main takeaways from this study that really surprised me is all of these researchers think that it's really underreported. which is kind of interesting, like the idea, because something that we barely know anything about, and there may be just a lot more people
that's really
having this experience.
Because how, I don't know, either I could see one end of the extreme or the other, either like, well, I can't say that, people are going to think I'm crazy, and
right.
you don't, or who the fuck is this person? Of course I don't want to be sleeping next to you.
Right.
I don't know. That's really interesting to think about.
I draw a parallel between people that come to my private practice for anxiety disorders, because it's one of the things that I feel like I have a certain level of expertise in. And as I teach it, as I, sort of teach them skills and give them insight, and we develop sort of this, we kind of work together on a collaborative process for addressing their issues, is one of the things that comes up more so than people talking about depression is people are always, especially men, never want to admit that they have anxiety. And they never want to admit how crippling or challenging it is, because it's like that scene where Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind is saying, well, I should be able to fix this. I'm the smartest guy in the world. I should be able to figure this out.
Yep.
And I think that's the way we look at things that we think, well, it's just nervousness, it's just anxiety, when it's actually not. It's a huge deal.
Sure.
So if people are unwilling to admit how anxiety plays a role in their life, can you imagine if you had something huge,
right,
like a delusional belief that, like, well, shit, I think my whole family's been replaced. What do you do with that?
You don't tell anyone, or you tell everyone. It's got to be one of those extremes. That's, jeez.
That's a sitcom right there.
All righty. Our first case and episode of 2020 in the books.
So it's a little bit shorter this time, but that's okay.
Yeah,
we're doing good. I wanted to thank everybody. One of the things that I'm noticing over the last month, we have had more listeners write to us with show suggestions, and questions. Thank you so much. Such
good stuff.
Yes, such great stuff. Angie Thompson wrote in just recently. I want to let you, and she wants to, is very interested in Munchausen by proxy.
Everybody's asking us
to do it. The only reason we haven't done it is we've got to figure out a way that doesn't just rehash all of the issues with Gypsy Rose. We just don't want to kind of rehash that. We want to find a different way about it. So that's definitely on the books, I promise you.
And that's also it was kind of a contender for the case we were going to cover at True Crime Podcast Festival last year. So I think we still kind of have it in our back pocket for this year with Getting Off.
Oh, absolutely. That's I'm hoping that's what's going to be. Because there's such a legal
component to it. So maybe we'll save it for something big like that.
Yes. And we've got plenty of other ones that have written in. I'm just very excited about having another listener question, episode, but I don't want to do one every other week, because then we just get we're doing nothing but answering questions. But we'll get around to it.
We save all of them, and we'll definitely, we love the suggestions. So you might even hear a suggestion here or there, but we get great questions from you guys, and we try to answer them right away if we're not saving it for an episode that we see coming up. But other than that, we will be probably popping on to some other podcasts, doing some guest spots. So we will let you know where to listen to those in the coming months. And I don't know, just tons of stuff planned for the next few months.
Should we brag about what we did in December?
Yeah, well, I think we talked about prepping for it.
We talked about prepping for it. It went off really well.
Yeah.
So look, you guys, as much as we're 36 episodes in, and we're having a blast doing this, and we get great feedback, and we love critique so that we can become better at this. We realized that this was the first time that we were actually doing a professional, non-entertainment based presentation for a group of law enforcement and related individuals. And it was and like we said, it was the first time we ever presented together professionally, and it was so much fun. I was so a blast.
Nervous beforehand. I was like, I gotta pee, I gotta get up, I gotta walk around, I gotta
I've known, as long as I've known you, I mean, you're an enigma then, because I had no idea that you were that nervous.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
But it went really well. We got such good, lovely feedback.
Great feedback. We presented on the incel phenomena, and Shiloh and I, because we continue to delve into this phenomenon with our wonderful colleague Nama Cates,
right,
and some other researchers, we have a take on things that is slightly different, and an important discernment between lumping everybody in as a potentially violent person when that's just not what this phenomenon is about at all.
Right.
And if everybody looks at it as a threat, then we're not going to be getting help to the people that really may want some help, and to see a doorway out of that belief system and that lifestyle.
Well, and I feel like, as I have told people sort of about our presentation, other people that we work with, that they're like, what's that? And I feel like there's sort of this PSA component, especially with people with children. And as much as people live online lives and teenagers and kids, it feels like this warning tale of just pay attention to what your kiddos are doing out there. And I've had that conversation a number of times where they're like, what is that? And if more parents ask that,
yeah, just being aware. There's a great article that's sort of related to that, that was on Huffington Post, that a mom wrote about. I think the title is I lost my son to the alt-right, but I got him back.
Oh, wow.
And it was written by a very, very talented writer, explaining that her son, who was 13 or 14 years old, was going through an extremely awkward time, troubles at school, good student, but problems with socialization, but a very smart kid. And he really got sucked into an alt-right, ultra-right-wing, white nationalist ideology, and really got sucked into it. Almost not. He wasn't. There was never any evidence that he was radicalized, but he was really, coming to the dinner table, going, "Well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this?" And as a mom, an intellectual mom, she wanted to allow her child that space for him to develop intellectually, but she had real questions when he wanted to go to a rally.
Oh, boy.
And this was before the Charleston rally, but she felt like she had to honor it, and in a way, it turned out being one of the best things possible, because the kid got there and he realized he had nothing in common with these people at all. That there was like a real difference between the actual presentation of it and their
the veneer online.
Exactly,
yeah.
And their disingenuousness about what they were presenting online. So it was a good version of it, but ultimately it comes back to what you're talking about. It's just having parents be aware that kids are sponges, and especially in the vast world of the manosphere. And we talk about the manosphere being this sort of big global online entity where the incel community is only one part of it. You have to be really careful about how that indoctrinates children into thinking in terms of people not all being equal, and that's a pretty dangerous thought.
Yeah, definitely.
So we did really well. So thank you all. Thanks to all of our listeners for allowing us this level of success, for us to feel confident enough to go in front of basically an international organization and do a presentation that not only made us look good, but made the people that we work for look really good. Sure. It was a great experience, and everybody who's listening today is a part of that. We really appreciate it.
I agree. All right. We will see you next time on LA
Not So
Confidential.
Bye, folks. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.